This video will guide you through the steps necessary to get started in CS2316. If you're curious about the keys I'm pressing, they are displayed in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. First, open up your browser. I like to start applications by saying Command Space on a Mac and then type in the application I want. So go to your browser and visit cs2316.goodtech.edu. Click on the resources page, and in this video we're going to do the 3 steps under getting started. We're going to install Python, check our Python installation, and choose and install a text editor. Well, we're not going to choose one. You're probably all going to use Sublime Text, so I'll just show you that. Now in this class we don't use IDEs. I want you to use your computers more directly and sort of teach you a little bit how computers work. So we're going to use the command line and text editors. So because of that, I will teach you a little bit about how computers work. All right. So computers are like onions. They're organized in layers, and when you dig into them, they make you cry. So at the middle of the computer, you have the hardware. That's at the core of that computer onion. That's the central processing unit, the microprocessor, like if you have an Intel Core i7 or whatever. The memory, the RAM, the hard disk, or solid state drive, if that's what you have. Displays, keyboards, input devices of various kinds, and so on. On top of the hardware, you have an operating system. Now, if every application ever written had to deal with the hardware directly, it would be very tedious because there are different displays, different keyboards, different kinds of memories, hard disks, and stuff like that. So the operating system provides a layer of abstraction for all the applications that run on a particular computer. Operating systems include macOS, Linux, and Microsoft Windows. Those are the big 3. All right. Now, we as users don't usually interact directly with the OS either. We interact with something called applications. I'll abbreviate it apps. Now, apps include web browsers, Office programs, IDEs, and so on. Chrome is an application. I'm using an application to do this drawing for the video, to do the screen recording, and all kinds of stuff. All right. But there's a particular kind of application that I want to show you today, and that is a shell. So a shell is an application that gives you direct access to the operating system's services. All right? And in most computers, you're already familiar with a graphical shell. And the graphical shell is things like if I click on an application, then it loads and runs that application. That's an example of something that an operating system shell gives you. Another thing that an operating system shell gives you, and this is the thing we'll talk a lot about today, I just clicked on Finder. This is the File Explorer for macOS. This gives me access to the file system. So I can browse the file system. This is my home directory, and I can see different files. I can create new folders. We'll call them directories when we get to the command line, and so on. I can make subdirectories inside there. And so on. All right. So the Finder gives me access to the file system of the computer. By the way, one little tip: if you are using macOS, go to your Finder preferences, and on the sidebar, make sure you have your home directory clicked, because if you don't have that selected, then when you look at the sidebar of your computer, you're not going to see your home directory. So if you click that to select the home directory, and now it'll be displayed. All right. Now, Another kind of shell is a terminal or a command line shell. So if I go to the terminal program on macOS 10, now I see a different interface to my operating system. All right. And the chief thing that we do with the command line is navigate the file system and run programs. All right. So your terminal is probably not going to look like this because I have mine customized. This is called a prompt string. You are going to see something like this. It's going to display your username and the computer name and whatever your current directory is, and then a prompt that says, I'm waiting for input. All right. This tilde sign here is an alias in Unix. If I change directory to tilde, then I go to my home directory. And if I want to see the full path name where I am, I say pwd for present working directory. I think it might be cwd on Windows. And it shows me my home directory. Okay. Now, notice, and this is my home directory. It's /users/Chris. And if I click on my home directory here, I see that, I can't really drag that around, but you see that the Finder is showing me /users/Chris. So if I look in my home directory, I see an applications directory, a bin directory, certs, CS2316, and so on. If I go back to my command line and do an ls for directory listing, I see exactly the same applications or same directories. All right. So it's applications, and this is sorted a little bit differently because in the command line, all uppercase letters are taken to come before all lowercase letters, whereas in the Finder they're sorted a little bit differently. But notice these are just two different views of the same thing. And if I go into my CS2316 directory with the cd command, I will see my sub1 directory. And if I go to my Finder, click on CS2316, I see my sub1 directory. All right. If I want to go into my sub1 directory, cd sub1, now I'm in the sub1 subdirectory. And notice that my prompt string is showing me where I am. It's giving me my bearings in the file system. Now, if I want to go to the parent directory, the file system is organized as a tree. So directories, you can think of those as interior nodes of a tree, and files themselves are leaf nodes. All right. So if I want to navigate somewhere else in the file system, I have to go back up the branches of the file system tree. So if I want to go back into CS2316, I say cd ... And now I'm in CS2316, as you can see. If I do my listing, I see my sub1 directory. If I want to get back to my home directory, cd ... Also, anytime you're in the command line, if you just say cd, it'll take you to your home directory. All right. Now I have a command on my install on my Mac called tree. I'm going to cd back into CS2316. So I have this sub1 directory. If I enter the tree command, I can see the directory tree from my current location on the disk. If I cd back up to the home directory and I do the tree command again, then it shows me everything that's in my home directory, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. That's a lot of stuff. So I'll do Control-C to stop that. Whenever you're running something and you want it to stop, maybe you've written a program that has an infinite loop and your program's not terminating, just click on Control-C and that should stop the program, at least from the command line. Okay, So that's how the file system works. Now, let's go ahead and go through the steps of getting started now. Go ahead and keep my terminal open. So the first thing to do is install Python. Now when I click on these things, I'm going to hold down the Command key. I think it would be Control key on Windows so that they open in another tab. So if I click on this mini conda link, now there are other ways to install Python, but this is the best way. You want to install the Miniconda version for your particular platform, Linux, macOS 10, or Windows, and you want Python 3.6. Now, if you have Windows or Linux and you're wondering whether to get 64-bit or 32-bit installer, get the 64-bit installer. Unless you have a very old computer, you have a 64-bit computer. All right. Now, I have macOS 10, so I will download the 64-bit bash installer. Installing this on, apparently I have a bunch of other versions of it. I want to get rid of that parenthesize 2 because that's not how it's going to look on your machine. Replace that. Okay, now this is important. Do not click on this file. If you click on this file, then it will open in TextEdit and it will get corrupted. All right. The way you run this file, this is an installer script. In particular, it's a shell script. So Alt-Tab, back over to my terminal. I CD into my downloads directory, and I do an ls-m star. That'll show me everything in this directory that starts with an M and ends with anything. All right. And I see all the million different copies of Miniconda that I've downloaded. Now, to run the Miniconda installer, I want to say bash. What that does is it invokes the bash program, and then I will give a command line argument of miniconda3-latest blah blah blah.sh. Also notice that when I'm typing these things, type a capital M, I hit tab. So for tab completion. And then it completes as much as it can before there are multiple choices. And if I keep hitting tab, then it shows me those choices. And I type a little more, like a capital M for macOS, hit tab again. It auto-completes as much as it can. The only two choices are the one ending in .sh and the one with parentheses 1.sh. So I'll just go to the one that I just downloaded. And now what this command says is invoke bash and tell bash to run this bash script called miniconda latest blah blah blah. All right, and that is going to install miniconda for you. All right, so first thing to do in the installer is review and accept the license. So just keep hitting enter until it asks you to type yes. All right, and then answer yes. And then continue with the installer. Now, anytime you're running an installer, it's good advice to accept the defaults. If you don't accept the defaults, you should really know what you're doing, because if you don't accept the defaults, if you install something in a different location or fail to do a system setting, and then you get somebody to try to help you, then your installation is going to look different from most people's, and it's going to complicate things. So I'm just going to accept the defaults by hitting enter. And then it's going to go through the process here. Now, at the end here, and I think there's a graphical installer for Windows. It asks if you want it to update your path variable. And it'll say something like that on Windows too. Definitely say yes. All right. Now, once I've done that, I have Conda installed and I have Python installed. All right. Now, in order to be able to actually use it, I need to exit my terminal and start it up again. That's so it rereads its configuration and it knows where to find Conda on the path. All right, now if we go back to our resources page, there's a bunch of stuff that we need to install. If I just copy this, notice that in these code boxes that contain interactions with the shell, the prompt string will be listed. Don't copy that when you're copying and pasting. Just copy this stuff, all right? What I've copied there. Now, I'm not gonna do all this right now because I don't want to take the time in this video, but you should go back and do this. In fact, you can pause this video right now and do that if you want. But I am going to do this, Conda, update Conda, to make sure I've got the latest version of mini Conda. So copy that, go back to my terminal, paste, and update Conda. Enter to accept the default, which is enclosed in the square brackets there, the yes. Now I've got the latest version of Conda. Now, when you install Conda, you get Python with it, all right? So now we can go back to our browser and we want to check our Python installation, all right? The way to do that is to say Python space dash dash version, all right? And we should get a response that looks something like this. Our response will say Python 3.6. Now, if you installed Python from Miniconda, then you can just say Python instead of Python 3, and that's what I'll do. On some systems, you have to type Python 3. As I say Python space dash dash version. So the dash dash version is what's called a command line switch. And what that does is it tells Python, don't actually run a script, don't run the interactive interpreter, just print out a version string to the console. All right? And we can see, if you get this output, Python 3.6 from Continuum Analytics, then you've successfully installed Python. So now we're done with step 2. The last step is to install and configure a text editor. So if we click on our text editors guide, we see a document that informs you a little bit about text editors, and I personally use Emacs, the one true editor, but Emacs has a very steep learning curve, which I don't expect you to do in this class. Maybe someday, especially if you decide to be a computer science major, then you should definitely learn Emacs or perhaps Vim. But Emacs is the most powerful text editor out there. And I don't say that jokingly, it really is. But Sublime Text is also very, very good, and it's going to be much more familiar to you. So if you click on this recommendation for Sublime Text, here are instructions for installing and customizing Sublime Text. All right, so we'll visit the Sublime Text website. There is a new version of it. So we want to download for OS 10. Sublime Text 3. Now, I've already done this. Do I already have this? No, I don't. So I'll go ahead and download it again. So save it. Now, for a DMG file, which is a disk image file, it is fine to just click on the file to open it. Now, as with other Mac applications, the way you install it is you drag the icon from the disk image, and this is just a shortcut to applications, and it says that an item named Sublime Text is already there. Might as well replace it, why not? Okay, so now I have Sublime Text installed. Get rid of these. Alright, now to start Sublime Text, I like to use my keyboard, Sublime Text. You can also drag the application icon I'm just going to cancel this real quick. You can also, if I go to Finder, if you open up your Finder, you can go to Applications, and you can drag, there's Sublime Text. You can drag your Sublime Text.app over to the dock. I'll put it right there next to, actually I'll put it right next to Emacs because it's a text editor. All right. So go back and start Sublime Text again. Of course, the first time it's going to say you downloaded this off the internet. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. All right. Now you're running Sublime Text. Now the first thing you want to do with any text editor is customize it. If we go back, you can read about customizing your text editor. Most text editors ship with pretty dumb defaults in many cases. And it's very important to customize your editor. It's especially important in Python, which we're going to be doing, which I'll explain in a little bit. So the first thing to do is to set up some basic customization. So go under your basic settings here and copy this text, everything between the curly braces and including the curly braces. So I'll go ahead and copy that to the clipboard, and then go back to Sublime Text and go to Preferences, Settings, and you'll get two windows here. The default settings are on the left, you don't edit those, and then the user customizations are on the right. Highlight these curly braces, you can delete them if you want, and you're basically replacing that dictionary with the dictionary you copied from the web page. All right, and then do Command S or Control S on Windows to save those, and now we've customized certain things in our editor. I would also recommend that you go to the key bindings here. These key bindings are for macOS. If I manage to get Windows installed on a machine somewhere, then I might do another one of these videos for Windows. But the keys will be a little bit different on Windows. So I'll copy that, go back over to Sublime Text, and instead of Preferences Settings, I'll go to Preferences Key Bindings. Same thing here. On the left pane, we've got the defaults, and in the right pane, I want to replace this with what I copied from the website. And in a future video, I'll explain to you what that means. Notice here, though, that when I edit something in what I'm going to call this a buffer because that's what Emacs calls it. This is an editor tab or a buffer, so I'm editing some text here, and this happens to be connected to some text on the disk. If what I have typed into this editor window, if I've typed stuff into this editor window, then it's no longer the same as what's on the disk, and this little the tab shows a circle instead of an X. If I do Command S or Control S on Windows, that turns into an X, meaning that the file on disk is up to date. All right. Okay.